Welcome to Tech Simplified, and my name is Sly Gittins. I have the one, the only, Veronika. She made the transition from an individual contributor to a manager now, is trailblazing and doing speaking events. I want her to reshare her story, because if you didn't know, I'm gonna put the link in the bottom, or if you look and listen to this on your phone, it's gonna be in the show notes. Go listen to part one. You want to see the evolution of her character and how she's now leading and transforming within SHI. Veronika, would you please share a little bit about your story and where you are today, and and who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, I just got to say congratulations to you for being the top 18th best woman in tech podcast. That is incredible. So
Thank you.
thank you for doing this. This is awesome, and it's so fun to be a part of these. So a little bit about myself. I've been in the industry a little bit over a decade now, based out of Buffalo, New York. So I started at Ingram Micro. Naturally, that's one of the biggest employers here. And so tech was always a field I was in. I started as a technical contributor in various different roles. And long story short, I'll just kind of keep it short, but I transitioned into SHI about almost 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, as a security engineer. And oh my gosh, it was tough. It was a way different world. I got put into a lot of situations where it really stretched me. And I think I talked to you actually in the beginning of this role, and I kind of said, I don't know if I can do this. And long story short, I worked hard. I had really great leaders to push me through, and I found myself in a leadership role, which is what I'm doing now. Right now, I'm managing a portion of our security practice at SHI, and it's awesome. It's so much fun. I love it.
Oh, that's fantastic. So I think you touched on it a little bit, but what really inspired you to make the transition, from an individual contributor to a people manager?
Yeah. So it's funny because throughout my career, people have told me, "Oh, you'd be a great leader. You have the capability. There's something within you that strikes me as a leader." And I never really understood it back then. So it makes sense to me now. So just kind of looking at my past, I've always been in leadership types of not roles, but team leads, mentors. I've always been involved in mentorship, and I think it's really important to help others. And I found so much joy in that.
Yeah.
Not only that, but I noticed that the people that I gravitate towards and that are mentors of mine, they all have like a similar trait, a commonality of just being brave and selfless, like stepping up, doing things you don't necessarily want to do, but you do for the greater team. I saw that within some of these people, and I just thought, I want to be like that, right? So I've built that character within myself, and I think I also understand and appreciate the bigger picture, right? So conceptually, what are we trying to accomplish, and how are we going to get there? Not just thinking of my specific goals. So that always kind of helped me align to that leadership mindset. What's important for me too is growth. So it's a core value of mine. And when I started as an IC in my current organization, I mentioned I struggled a lot, I stumbled, but I learned. And I got to a point where I feel like I mastered that role. So naturally it's like, well, what's next for me? And I reflected on this. And about 2 years into the role as a security engineer, I started to share my interest with my leader. I was already mentoring, but he was kind enough to put me in other positions where I continued to further that mentorship. I started to lead team calls. And I didn't realize it then, but what he was trying to figure out is, are you able to influence others without the title? And that's really, really hard. So long story short, I was fortunate enough to join the leadership side, and I'm now managing this awesome team. And I got put into the role about 9 months ago. So still new, still learning.
Giving your flowers now, because one thing you said there is, one thing for me, seeing you from your beginning of your career, you always overcame adversity. You always had a little bit of fear, but you didn't let your fear immobilize you for achieving your dreams, which I think is commendable. And it actually goes perfectly into the next question. So what were some of the biggest challenges you faced during the transition, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. And so exactly what you said, and we touched on it, right? It's the influence part. So how do I influence others when I don't even have the title? And also when you have the title, you still are challenged with influencing others. Why would someone listen to me? So being a new leader, never having this position before, there's a lot of self-doubt. This person is much more experienced than I am. Who, what can I teach them? What am I going to teach this person? Stuff like that. And we talked about this before, Sly. I mean, you straight up said to me before, you need to work on your confidence, right? So I'm like, oh shoot, like you're right. So what helped me was, one, being authentic. I pride myself in being authentic. That's one of my core values. So I didn't come trying to have this authoritative energy.
Yeah.
It almost helped that I was working on my confidence, and I almost, because I had that self-doubt, because I almost tried harder.
Yeah.
And it helped me be more relatable to my people and to be honest. And I think that helped build trust with them.
I think that's a beautiful answer you said right there, right? When that authentic self is, I think, is critical. And the only reason why I made sure to say your confidence, because for myself, you lose confidence, you lose, can I do this? I haven't done this. And like you said, sometimes when your first time, or you're younger than everyone, or maybe you are leading people with PhDs and you don't have one, right? Why should they trust you? And I realized your manager would never put you in a role if they didn't think you could do it. So the main point of time, you got to realize we got to get over this imposter syndrome and just go out and do it. I didn't think I could have a woman in tech podcast because I ain't a woman in tech, right? But I realized I could be an ally. And if I reached out to you and a few other ladies to say, hey, I'm doing this woman in tech podcast. How do I make sure it's not about me? Right. How do I make sure it's about the women and telling their stories? Right. And then that gave me the blessing, right? So I told me what to do and I was able to do it. Right. But it took a lot for me to put myself out there, because I get it all the time. Why are you doing this? Are you doing this just for clout? Are you doing this just to act like you're helping, but you're really not, right? Like what are you in it for? Right. And I realize that's a part of the game. You just got to trust yourself, because I know why I'm doing it, right? I know I've been sharing what I've been doing it. And then as a leader, you got to continue to show people why you're doing it. They don't know your vision. They're not in your mind every day, right? So it's up to us to continue to articulate that vision, right? That's what they're asking. What is your vision? And I realized you got to bring it down to the individual too. When you're working in a team, especially a smaller team, is what each person is different. I know I can tell you my daughter and my son. My daughter hates public appreciation. If I say, man, you did a great job singing, she will clam up and get angry and leave. Right? My son will be like, he'll start, yeah, right, but that's just his personality, right? Same thing for my older brother and me. Public appreciation. I hope you do it. What you just said to me made me happy. He wouldn't want that. Just got to know the person you're working with, right? To understand what are they comfortable with, So I'm glad.
That's just it. Yeah, it's like exactly what you said. It's like I stepped out of my own shoes, stopped thinking about myself and my doubts, and I started thinking about the other person. What does the individual need? And I got put in the role for a reason, whether I saw it or not at the time. But let me just stop thinking about myself and just build this trust, work with these people to build this partnership. And when you get that experience of, oh my gosh, like I've been coaching this person, I've helped them, and now I'm just seeing them blossom, and it reflects in their performance. And that is just the most rewarding feeling. And that was my goal. And when I felt that, even before I was a leader in mentorship, that's what I leaned on to help me get past my own doubt, because it's not about me. It's about that person.
True. And you're right. And you kind of mentioned this, but I want, this is a really good question, is because I feel like I'm putting myself in the audience shoes, right? They're like, what is your leadership style, right? Since becoming a manager, I know you talked about, letting people be themselves and it's not about you, but what would you say your leadership style is? And I think I know.
Do you? Okay. So you touched on it with your kids, right? It's like, one, I'm still figuring it out, and I think I'm always going to be figuring out, but it's important to be flexible. All my one-on-ones are so different because it's based on what that person needs. I kind of allow them to come in and tell me what they want to work on. And sometimes it's simple. Sometimes that person's like, hey, this is exactly what I need. I know I'm struggling here. Other times it's really interesting. They don't know how they're even doing, or they don't understand what they want, what the expectation is from a leader and an individual contributor. So you kind of need to dig a little bit and look for that stuff. One common denominator is taking the time to build trust. So we align here with John Maxwell leadership style. Are you familiar with that? at
No.
all?
Oh, John Maxwell.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love his books.
Yeah, exactly. So like the first level is you're in the position because you're there. So people follow you because they have to. But how, again, it's the influence. How do you go past that? It's like, how are you building a relationship with your ICs to trust you enough to be vulnerable and to share what's going on in their week, in their world, right? And that's how you can excel once you understand them. So being vulnerable, being authentic is huge too. I love that my leaders are this way, and I learned a lot from what I saw with that. So the vulnerability, being able to share, hey, I'm feeling this way, or hey, this change is coming, and I do have concerns about it, but we'll get through it together. So that kind of opened up a door for me to be vulnerable with my upline, and I appreciate it so much. So that's what I try to do with my people too. And I feel like, again, it's the authentic part of it. It's, is your person comfortable enough to tell you what's going on, and do they trust you to help them?
That's great. I read a book by Brene Brown, um, and she talks about vulnerability, taking off that armor, and showing that, because that usually will free us to have deeper connections with the people that we interact with, especially the people that we're leading. So I think that's really cool. And if anyone else, that Brene Brown is
Love
Dare
it.
to Lead. It's a fantastic book, and I'm just read it. I think the other book is called Atlas. I'm reading that, Atlas, and that
Nice.
was pretty good too.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
the next thing I was talk about, how do you motivate and engage your team to ensure they're meeting their goals and objectives? And you talked about that right now. You talked about getting to know them on a personal level, being flexible, really listening and making us and making sure it's not about you. Is there anything else you want to add on that? Because I feel like you answered that question already.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It's like everyone's different. They listen differently. They take feedback differently. They're motivated in different ways. So listening is huge. So I've always been really good at observing, and you know this. I come from a big family. I have a lot of
Yeah.
siblings. I'm the youngest, so I was always the watcher.
Yeah.
So it does. I don't want to say it comes naturally to me because listening is very hard. But for example, I was providing feedback to an individual on my team. Great person, great engineer, but not hitting their goals because they were struggling to focus. And I found them to be involved in just so many things. So I shared my feedback in the one-on-ones. It wasn't sticky, and I couldn't figure out why. I even gave examples of, hey, this is how I used to do it when I was in the role. It still wasn't working. And then I realized that this person is a conceptual thinker. I can give them all the details in the world, but I think they know what their issue is. They just don't know why they need to fix it. So I reframed how I approached it, and I said, hey, like, when you do this, this is the brand you're creating. If you're telling me you want to be in this role, you're not going to get that role because of what you're doing, because people are not going to see you as that next thing because of the situation that you're in. And it was such an eye opener. I was like, oh shoot, like I didn't realize the conceptual view of like how this plays into the bigger picture. It was a huge eye opener for not only that individual but for me, because that was the first time I ever gave critical feedback like that. And I will tell you that changed that person, and they started to act differently. And it was just awesome. It showed me that you have to understand your people. You have to listen and give them feedback. Try to like articulate how you give feedback specific to that individual. Very difficult. I'm still trying to figure that out.
Well, that was awesome, right? Because I'm like, man, I never would have thought about that, changing to conceptualize it. Because that makes sense, right? Because if you're giving a person details and they want to kind of see what's the outcome of it, because they're like, oh, I'm doing this because I want to get there. And you're saying, well, what you're doing is not going to get you to this finish line. You will get to a finish line, but it's not going to get you to where you're going. Like you're at a fork road right now. And if you continue to keep going that way, you're not going to go right? You're going to go
Right.
left. Right. Mm-hmm. And then you help them re-clarify it. I think that's brilliant, to be honest with you. So like, if this is the beginning, I'm excited to see what you're going to continue to do in the future. And I think one thing you said that hopefully didn't go over as a gem is that a leader is always learning and growing and evolving and changing. So even what you're doing today, not necessarily what you need to do tomorrow. And whatever new role that you're taking on is going to have new variables, new things. You're going to have new technology that solves certain problems. You're going to have different types of people, right? What if you move into a less senior role where people's are, a little bit newer in their role? You don't have different problems. Or you go to executives and you're leading. Now you don't need to tell them anything, right? So yeah, I think that was pretty cool. So To finish it off, right, is how do you continue to develop your people management skills, and what advice would you give others who are considering or making a transition into leadership?
Yeah, so I'm going to start off with the latter part of the question, because what you just said, I relate to it so much. People are very complicated, so this is a role for someone that is adaptable to that. You have to be able to change, to adapt, constantly learn, because each person is going to bring you unique challenges. So constantly reading books, constantly getting feedback from others, and sharing with other peer leaders is so crucial.
Yeah.
I would say mentorship is probably one of the most important parts of any career. And that's what really has helped me excel, asking other leaders on their opinions. And I have been so fortunate to have all these great people come across my career where they've helped me tremendously. I think it's so crucial to not only have mentors, but to be a mentor, because I actually found that you learn so much about yourself when you're mentoring others. It's honestly amazing. I feel like we've talked about that before. I mean,
Yeah.
you're a mentor of mine, and I feel like we share that experience of when we talk to each other, we each learn something new.
Right. Yeah.
So my suggestion would be to get on people's calendars that are leaders that you aspire to be. Kind of how I mentioned earlier on, I gravitate toward these people that had these characteristics. So spend time with them. Don't be afraid to just throw time on their calendar. Don't be afraid to reach out to people on LinkedIn. Go outside of your comfort zone, learn. Constantly ask questions and learn from other people. For me, I'm continuously doing that. I'm reading. You mentioned a lot of books like the Brene Brown. I feel like that talks a lot about vulnerability, and that has helped me a lot. The Dare to Lead and Daring Greatly. I liked Radical Candor by Kim Scott. I feel like that's a fan favorite with the leaders.
Yeah.
It's really good because it's clear as kind. And sometimes you have to be very clear with your people, and it's uncomfortable, but that's the right thing to do. And that's what I've learned from that. Start with why. I actually feel like you recommended that one to me.
That one's amazing. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, to understand how to prioritize. And that's like, as a leader, that's a big part of the role, is like, where do you focus on? There's so much to do. What do you prioritize? What's the right move? Podcasts too. Like, I like to walk my dog, so I'll just throw in my headphones, get a podcast going. One that was just recommended to me, Finding and Becoming Great Mentors and Sponsors with Carla Harris. I forgot whose podcast that is, but there's so much out there. If people are out there are considering the transition, I'm always happy to answer questions if anyone wants to reach out to me. I love talking about this. I feel like I'm in a position where I'm just around such great leaders, so it inspires me to also help other upcoming leaders or even current leaders. It's really great to help others.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing resources, because I think sometimes when you get on these shows, we talk about where we are, but not what tools we use to get there. And I think that was imperative. Like, someone else I like a little bit more raw is David Goggins. He talks about, I find excuses, right? Something similar, going to the gym. Like, it was cold outside. It was like -10. I'm in, we in Buffalo, like negative outside. And I was like, you know what? I gotta go. Like, there's no excuse. I remember I was tired. My daughter, I needed to read the book. She, I wrote a book for her. She's like, Dad, can you read the book for me? Got to read the book, right?
Yeah.
You got to do the things that we don't want to do, right? Some things that I know I need to do. Like, I like creating, but sometimes I don't like to do the day-to-day operations. I got to get it done, right? And there's no excuse. There's no excuse that it's going, because I'd rather finish life with the scars of trying than have a perfect body that I didn't push. Right. So the same thing that we need to do as leaders is not only that we continue to push ourselves, you got to realize, the people, the talent that we have, how far can they go? How much stress can they handle? What do they really want? If they don't want to be in leadership, that's great. Like, how do we make them a principal engineer or a senior? What else after that? Once they hit the plateau, how do we continue to encourage someone who's been doing it for 10 years? Do we switch them into a new role, right? These are the things we have to continue to push ourselves. I do like David Goggins, and he give it kind of direct. So that was a really good one. I also listened to a really good book that helped me understand power dynamics. And it's Acting with Power. And her name is Deborah Brufield. I watched the video, her TED Talk, actually, when she had the Stanford class back in the day. she had it on her website, so I downloaded it, paid for it.
What is it called?
Acting with Power.
Acting.
Yeah, Deborah Grufield. Check out her TED Talk and read the book. I'm listening to the book
Oh,
now.
okay.
That showed me how to, when I'm in different power dynamics, how to give and transfer power. Because sometimes, you're going to be in these situations where you have the power, but you don't want to make someone feel paralyzed. Like anytime me and you used to speak, even though you might saw me as a senior, I saw us as equals, right? Because I didn't want, there's no need for me to showcase power. Because
Right.
to be honest, the other day, I've been telling you I wanted to go into management, and now you're teaching me, right? So now the power has shifted, right? Because now
But
you
we're still
are
equal.
expert at it, right? So it's kind of cool, right? To me,
Mhm.
that's what you want your mentees to do. Like I want
Yeah.
mentees that I will go work for in the future if I have to, right? Or if
Right.
we start a team, they could be a leader over here and I could be a leader over there, right? If you're
Right.
not doing that, then what's the point, right? Because then you might be, I might be stifling your success, right? Because me and your success could be different, and we at different stages of our lives. So, right, so I think acting with power, we need to really understand that. Even with my kids, yes, I'm an authoritative figure, and most of the time I have the power.
Yeah.
Sometimes my daughter she needs that power. She can tell she wants it. I can't remove that from her, right? I got
Mhm.
to teach her how to use those skills. Or my son, the same thing, right?
Right.
Because sometimes that's what usually happens, So we don't know what our gestures are doing. You don't know what our tone is doing. We don't know what our body language. That's what goes back to the confidence. So how do you
Mhm.
like showcase confidence and not arrogance or
Right.
cockiness, right? Is a fine line between that, right? So knowing that, and she does a really great job at doing that. That was a fantastic
That's
book.
awesome. And
So,
it's like I we touched on this earlier. It's like being a leader is selfless. You're not thinking about yourself, you're thinking about the bigger picture,
yeah,
and it's being brave. And with that selflessness, like as an individual contributor, you're giving that up of like my goals,
yeah,
my performance, my metrics. It's no longer that.
correct.
Right. So as a leader, like you're not focused on your goals, you're focused on how to grow all these people in the overall business.
Correct. And that's true. And that's tough, man. Like I know from someone like myself who's a high performer who likes to create, that was something I had to teach myself for the last 2 years. Is I joined groups, even if I created an idea, I didn't take credit for it. I like, hey, good job, Veronica. We did this as a team, which we did. And I
Mhm.
didn't need the pat on the back. I didn't need
Right.
anything. Like even for the, getting 18, right? First thing I did is I gave the power back to the guests like yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm sharing your story.
Mhm.
Right? So for me, this ain't about me again, right?
Yeah.
That's one thing I'm finding that, in the beginning when I earned my career, I needed to be the person, I did that. Now I don't need to. Like we can solve a problem and I'm completely fine giving it to someone else and not even being a part of it, right? Because
Yeah.
it doesn't matter at the end of the day, right? So, because I know what I did, right? Sometimes you do want the credit, but sometimes you just don't need it, right? So, and as a leader, you're right. It's not if our team hit our numbers, it's great for me, right? But the first thing I got to do is say, Veronica, thank you, right? Thank you for your help, and this is what you did to push the number forward. Couldn't do it without you, and this is the reason why.
Mhm.
And you do that for each person in the way that they feel comfortable with, right? So, but
Yeah.
again, this has been a fantastic part two conversation. I just love to show the journeys and the evolution of the people that we have on the show, because I think that's critical. Is like, what were you doing before and what you're doing now? I think that will help people to show you that you could be on this journey. And sometimes I bet there were times at night you making these sacrifices to read these books, to do these things, and you're not seeing the immediate impact of your decisions, right? But I
Mhm.
think that's a part of the journey because look where you are
Yeah.
now. And I can
Yeah.
only imagine in 3 years where you're going to be, right? So, this is like a exciting story. So thank you for sharing and dropping all these gems. And,
Yes.
Sly Gittins and Veronica are out. Peace.
Thank you.